Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going very well. I'm excited. We're talking all things exercise physiology today.
Yes, specifically, we do talk a lot about you in the bathtub. I'm not going to lie.
Okay, yeah. And just to keep that narrative going, with a toque on.
With a toque on. I've now been using this episode to kind of point out ways that I feel like you could improve your heat training.
Okay, there is no way to improve it.
It's perfect.
Stephen Chung said he's going to name the protocol after me.
Oh, dear Lord.
He didn't say that at all.
He did not say
he said
just
it was
to be
excessive.
clear. It's definitely
So you're saying
excessive.
There's a second exercise physiologist who is now telling me that my master's do-it-yourself protocol is excessive.
If you could stop walking around the house afterwards, just dripping sweat and like heavy breathing everywhere, that would be fantastic. Yes.
It multitasks. It's a multitasking heat protocol.
Absolutely. It's not weird at all. Anyway, Julia is, like we said, a high-performance exercise physiologist. She's been working with Olympians over in New Zealand, primarily actually in canoe slalom and sailing. Okay. But a lot of her work actually has been around heat training. She's Canadian, but then ended up moving to New Zealand. So you can see where heat kind of became a very interesting topic for her. But we also talk about some interesting stuff around things like wearable use, how much is too much, just kind of like things to think about as you're using them. We get into one of my favorite topics. Obviously, everyone knows I'm really passionate about women in sport, but we get we get into a little bit of detail as far as hormonal birth control and training and stuff like that go. There's been a lot more talk lately, and I'm so excited about it, about the fact that no research is really done around the hormonal IUD and how it impacts female athletes, because typically you're talking about straight up hormonal birth control, just the pill basically, or you're talking about the no hormone copper IUD. But it's very hard to get answers about what's actually going on with the hormonal IUD. So we do kind of wrap on that a little bit. We talk about working through, cold and flu season, how to hopefully a little bit avoid catching colds, what her protocols are, because she's around a lot of high performance people. She cannot afford to get sick. Her protocols might be a little extreme for the average person, but I'm now really worried that Peter is going to listen to them and get even kookier than he already is.
I'm signed up.
We talk about her strength, her strength. So not her strength, like literally the word is her strength.co coaching course, where she's actually working to help coaches of young women athletes. And of course, we talk all things heat training, because even if you are heading into the winter months, there is still some, what's the word I'm looking for? There's still some usage for heat training. And honestly, if you're Canadian and in a really cold environment, frankly, heat training might just feel nice.
For sure. And I mean, gets into, we've spoken a lot about fall training and limiters and gaps and trying new things away from races. So it is, even if you just try, a protocol and figure it out at home once, even not for the strict benefit of like adapting, but to say, okay, I know what this is like now. Then when you are going to plan one, you say that, you have the equipment, you know what it's all about, you've done it, if it's closer to race season or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Okay, well, let's get into this with Julia. As usual, check out the show notes over at consummateathlete.com. Definitely head to the show notes for this one, because there are quite a few links, including her site and everything she is up to. And with that, let's get into it. All right, Julia, welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast. I'm so excited that we're finally doing this.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I had to laugh when I sent over the, getting ready for the podcast, and it was like, oh, what topics do you want to chat about? You had a few listed, and I was like, yes. I want to talk about them all, because you have such a cool like breadth of experience and in your research and working with all of these different athletes. So let's just start with like a quick background on you. How did you end up working in the high performance world? You work with Olympians now in canoe slalom, which is like such a hilariously cool sport, and sailing. So how did you end up here?
Yeah, so I grew up in Calgary, Canada, and I was a toddler when the '88 Olympics were there, and I guess that really left a big impression on me. And I always just had a big love for sport. And the sport I did growing up, I started when I was 8, cross country skiing, and I that was just like, okay, this is my sport, and this is the sport I want to do to get to the Olympics. And I just like was obsessed with that concept as a kid growing up, and I just loved the Olympics. And I don't know if it was I think it was just the environment, being in Calgary, and those good commercials that come on, those inspiring commercials come on anytime it's the Olympics that really pull at your heartstrings.
Canada is so good for that, honestly.
Yeah. And yeah, really supportive parents. And anyway, so I pursued that, and I when I finished high school, I decided I wanted to do kinesiology or sports science, and that was an obvious pathway for me. And yeah, I just got into physiology, and that just sat well with me because I love the how and the why things happen, and I love biology, and so understanding what's going on and how can you cause an adaptation and how can you optimize performance. Those were all buzzwords that I loved, and yeah, so that's kind of how I followed this pathway. And I did my undergrad at the U of C, University of Calgary, and then I actually, during that time, I ended up stopping skiing and kind of got to that level of realizing, I'm maybe not as genetically gifted as I had hoped for being an elite cross country ski athlete, and, wasn't making the junior national team and things like that. And at some point, there was other things going on that I might share later on in the podcast related to another project I'm working on. But yeah, somewhere along the line, you kind of have that moment of like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be me. And that's okay. And so I decided to do a uni exchange in Perth, Australia, where no one knows what cross country skiing is, which was handy.
Yeah.
That change in identity kind of. And I did my master's there, and then I ended up coming to New Zealand, where I am now. I've been for 11 years, and I did my PhD, and that was kind of the job that got me into, specifically into Olympic sport. I had been working in sport the whole time, but, working as a physiologist within the team here. And it's been a whirlwind, and I've loved every moment.
I love it. Okay. So what does a physiologist do exactly? Just
good question. Often I'm a physiologist. I've actually given up on that because they just think I'm a physiotherapist, and they start telling me about an injury they have and what should they do about it? And I'm just like, you know what? I don't know.
Not the same thing. Not the same thing.
But no, a physiologist is someone who is looking at optimizing training and recovery and performance strategy through a biological lens, is the simplest way of putting it, or a physiological lens. So the how and the why of what's going on at a cellular level in your body.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with like the recent, just like everything is a wearable now, you can measure everything. So what are some of the like metrics that you're actually looking at? And also, are these wearables actually as good as we think they are?
So for the sports I work with, I use Training Peaks, and that's a great platform. And I even use it for some non-endurance sports just because it's such a handy way of being able to monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And then the wearables, your heart rate, power, obviously. Wearables, I usually get my athletes to have an Oura ring, which I also use myself just because it's a simple thing to have, and they're not having to double wristband every day, which is sometimes nice.
Yeah. Okay, here's my question. You're in an area that's like quite hot. I imagine your summers are very sweaty. Have you figured out a way to like crack the Aura Ring code where you don't end up with like a clammy finger? Because that's been my issue with the Aura Ring. I'm like, I like it, but then
Oh,
like a week of wearing it, my skin is like peeling. It's pretty
okay.
gross.
It's possible. I don't know for sure, but it's possible that it's on a finger that's a little bit too snug. I know they encourage you to have it on like your index finger,
Yeah.
that's nice and snug. But I kind of found that, so I've moved to my middle finger, and there's just a little bit more movement, but it still reads really well, and I don't have
Okay.
that. So that's
Yeah,
potentially,
I might just be having, yeah, like a sizing issue because, yeah, I find that after a couple days of wearing it, I'm like, oh no, I have, like, it looks like I've just been like underwater and like buried for like 3 days or
yeah,
something.
you need
Doesn't
a
seem
little bit
good.
of air.
Yeah, it's one of those like, okay, I'm not really sure that I'm like helping myself at this point. Seems like I'm giving
Mm,
myself some kind of skin rash. So, okay, I might try it on a
yeah.
different finger. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, but no, the Aura Ring is great for I look at HRV with all my athletes, and I look at it within Aura, but I do pull the data out, and I have my own spreadsheets that's analyzing it, or I'll link athletes to HRV for training,
hmm
and that does a great job of the data analysis
We
for
love
you.
HRV for training here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Oura Ring is just handy for, like, I love that it measures body temperature. And if I ever have an athlete that has gotten a fever, I can tell right away by looking at their
hmm
data. And that's
Yes.
handy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That
and
was,
just this, oh, sorry.
oh, it's funny. No, like the Aura Ring, like I remember the one like month I was wearing it, I did end up really sick. And yeah, it like let me know kind of that morning. And I just kind of ignored it. I was like, whatever, I must be misreading. And then like by the afternoon, I was like, nope, definitely sick. Yep. This is a problem.
Yeah. And sleep is not bad either. Like, I've picked up a lot of my athletes, like, I work remotely now, and my athletes are overseas for a lot of the year anyways in the Northern Hemisphere. And
hmm
it will pick up, disruptions in sleep that are obvious. And, I can contact the athlete and be like, hey, just noticed your deep sleep is actually quite low now. Like, can you tell me why that might be? And we can address that before it becomes an issue. You know what I mean? So it is quite good. And the last thing I enjoy the Oura Ring for is menstrual cycle. I
Yeah.
feel like personally is quite good at um, detecting the change of the day that I'm going to get my period, because there's a drop in body temperature,
Yeah.
and around ovulation with an increase in body temperature. I feel like it's pretty spot on for me. I've some people say, oh, you can't rely on that, but it's actually pretty good for ballpark.
hmm Well, and actually what I wanted to ask you, I know, you do a lot of stuff with, girls and women in sport and female athlete physiology. And I was kind of curious, like where you think the research as far as like women athletes is these days, because I remember, 10 years ago, we were saying like no research is ever done on female athletes. Do you think actually stuff like the Oura Ring is changing that because now we actually have better access to things that do things like tracking periods?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it has for myself, and I even still, like, even some of my athletes who use an IUD, we can actually still track cyclical trainings or cyclical phases with their cycles, because
Yes.
it's a localized hormone. So
Yeah.
that's something that we actually look at. Like, I know I hear people saying, oh, if you're on using hormonal contraception, you can't you you lose that awareness, but you actually don't always completely lose that awareness. And there's, yeah, we still use some recovery and nutrition strategies for around the cycle phases for athletes that are using IUDs.
Okay, see, that is a question I have been asking for years and I had yet to get like an answer on it. Because yeah, I've been wondering about the hormonal IUD question for a long time because it's sort of a weird middle of the contraception discussion, right? Like we either talk about like the non-hormonal ones, like the copper IUD, or, using more of like a SAM plan method or whatever. And then we talk about the pill. But rarely do we discuss the hormonal IUD with like a different, delivery system for the hormones and a different dose. And I've always been so curious as to whether or not, all of the stuff we talk about when we talk about cycles actually applies if you're using the hormonal IUD.
Yeah, so it is kind of a middle ground, and for adult female athletes, it's often our go-to. For athletes that want to use hormonal contraception, we'll usually point them down that path. And I guess, yeah, so it is progesterone only, and it's a localized hormone, so you still will bleed, and you still will have a cycle, which is great.
Yeah.
And so often it's a much lighter bleed, but it still is there usually. And so I guess the thing that we're looking for there is, is there a change in that lighter bleed, in either the number of days you're bleeding, or maybe you miss it for a month or two. Like we want to know about that kind of change.
Mm-hmm.
So
now
yeah,
I do know
that something's maybe up if that changes.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of athletes who are using the hormonal IUD who just don't get periods anymore. Like I would say they actually still like, if you took their temperature, they would still have like sort of that same like cycle, but there's like no bleed. Is that I realize you're not like a gynecologist here. But if they've never gotten one while on a hormonal IUD, would that be a thing that you'd be worried about? Or is that just like, okay, if they've never gotten it on that IUD, it's less of a concern than if they were getting it and then they stopped getting it? Sorry, really specific question.
No, and you're spot on. That's correct. So it is common to not bleed at all, and that's fine. Yeah.
We're just looking for like changes.
A change, yeah.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. I love it. And I think what makes me so excited is just that we're having these discussions more and more. Whether it's on this podcast or just, even I know my friends are now just kind of chatting about this way more casually. And I think that's like so important for women athletes to have these discussions.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. But beyond women's physiology here, a big thing that you've worked on is heat training, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that was my PhD topic.
Yeah.
So did you want to ask me something?
Well, I wanted to just kind of get into like what got you interested in heat training, especially considering your cross-country ski background does not really lend itself to like, oh, I need to learn how to perform in hot environments.
No, it's quite funny. I always say I didn't choose the heat training chose me. So there was an opportunity advertised in New Zealand when I was in Australia for a heat PhD role that was embedded in the high performance program here in New Zealand. And I applied for that and I got the role. And it was during the Rio Olympic cycle.
Okay.
So I kind of got over here early 2013, and they just wanted me to answer questions that the sports had around heat. So it was kind of sport led, which was really fun because at that time, a lot of the research had been just looking more at kind of endurance sports. But then I got over here and I was getting questions from the sprint track cycling team about how can we use heat to enhance our training. And I got questions from the BMX team saying, you know what, I know we have a short event, but we're actually really struggling with all our gear in hot. So what can we do? And how do we implement as a power sport? How do we implement heat training? And that's a great question. It's like, no, you probably, as a sprint athlete, we don't want you to be doing all these long rides in a heat chamber. That's counterproductive in a way for your event. And we had similar questions from Dan in terms of, how do we structure this? How do we periodize heat training into our plan? And so these were the questions that were popping up, and I got to just tackle them. And during the Rio cycle, and then we moved into the Tokyo cycle, which was all about the heat. then I was given the opportunity to lead the heat strategy for the Tokyo cycle, which was really fun.
Okay, so I mean, what did we learn? Like, what are the do's and don'ts of heat training? And I mean, obviously, like, we're not talking to BMX athletes on this podcast. We're primarily talking to masters age endurance athletes. But like, what's our protocols these days? What do we know?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to do heat training. You can do active heat training. So you can find a heat chamber. You can train outside when it's warm. If you're a cyclist, it's sometimes a little bit trickier because you have the airflow and you have more cooling. So if I'm trying to get a heat stimulus in with an athlete and they're going outside on a bike, even if it's hot, they'll layer up. So they're not getting that convective cooling as much on the skin. So those are good options. Post-training sauna, post-training spa are great options. During COVID, when we had all the lockdowns and different things, we were giving our athletes notes about how to make a DIY spa in your tub, like how you can do that. You don't need to have a hot tub.
Okay. How do we do it? How do we do it? What's the advice? Because like we've talked about this before on the podcast. Peter is currently doing this.
Okay.
Like he comes in from rides and he does like a hot bath and then he puts like a wet towel over him. It's a whole thing.
Okay, cool.
So what's the good protocol?
Well, number one is get a thermometer from like a pool thermometer that is from a shop that they're super cheap. You need to know the temperature of the water and you want it to be about 40 degrees. And if it's changing, you need to top it up. And you really want to have submersion up to your shoulders. Right. Like generally any passive heat session that's immediately post-training, you want it to be post-training because your core temperature is already elevated. Okay, so you're just kind of adding on to that. If you're starting from rest, you need to almost double your heat exposure time. So instead of 30 minutes, you need 60 minutes. Right?
Gross.
Which is not nice. It's not very nice. So easiest view, straight after training, you hop into you get your tub to 40 degrees, you hop in up to the neck. You might only last 15 minutes like that, and then it is okay. Research showing that if you do bring your shoulders up and you still kind of keep from chest or belly button down in the water, it's still decent, but you just need to make sure that temperature is above 40. And if it's dropping, you need to top it up with some hot water.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple. What does he do with the towel?
Just kind of like drapes it like over top to try to like keep the heat in a little bit.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Sometimes once the tub is filled, some athletes will turn on the shower, which is not great for water, but and turns it on really hot, and then you get more steam and it's just hotter environment.
Okay.
And we'll use that as a DIY heat chamber. Turn the shower on or put some heaters in your bathroom in a small space and just crank up the temperature in there and put you hop on your trainer.
Oh my God, this sounds horrible.
Again, you need a thermometer, to gauge what's going on, but you can do it on your own. You can do a DIY setup. You just need to know what what the conditions are. And the biggest thing for yourself is to get adaptations for the heat that are going to be advantageous for performing in the heat. You need to increase your core temperature and you need to increase your sweat rate.
Gotcha. Okay. So first question, how often do we want to be doing this?
Okay, so it definitely works best consecutive days. So males and females actually take a different amount of time to adapt to the heat.
Of course.
So yes, so males can, do 5 days, consecutive days of heat, whether it's post-training or actually training in the heat, and that will elicit adaptations that we see a reduction in core temperature and an increase in sweat rate, and then perceptually they feel much better as well. Females take more like 10 days.
Ah,
like
come on.
closer to 10 days.
Well,
Or,
that just seems
7 to 10 days.
unfair.
Just a few, they you just need a little bit more. And it's because when we don't actually start sweating until we're a bit hotter.
Okay.
I start sweating earlier. Okay. So that's part of the reason. So something we have actually done condensed heat blocks with female athletes, and you'll love this. We'll preheat them before they get in the heat chamber on a bike.
Oh, it's like preheating an oven.
So it's like, okay, 15 minutes in the sauna, and then you're going to come in the heat chamber. And so we've already elicited the start of that sweat response, and that helps drive the adaptation. So
okay.
That's a handy tool and to use if you're trying to get the same adaptations in a shorter amount of time.
Okay.
And it works. It does work quite well. Yeah. So typically females just need a little bit more, like if you're looking at total volume of heat exposure, just need a little bit more. Another thing to consider that is if you do it during, say, the luteal part of the cycle where body temperature is a bit elevated, that's also another thing that will help with the heat adaptations because you're starting at a higher core temperature already.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can kind of make our cycle work for us a little bit here.
That's right.
Okay, I like that. And then my other question is after Peter is done with his heat thing, what he does is he puts on like a sweatshirt, sweatpants, wool socks, a hat, and like walks around just like sweating profusely. It's a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Does that make sense, or should you be like, what is your like cooling off after you're kind of out of the hot bath? Like, what's the best protocol there?
We don't. If we're trying to get a heat adaptation response, we don't encourage athletes to say do a cold plunge straight after their heat training session or their passive heat session. But I would just say have a shower, have a normal temperature shower, and then just focus on recovery. And we don't necessarily ask them to continue heat exposure. Like the heat exposure is the heat exposure, and 30 minutes of passive training or 60 minutes of active training, 30 minutes of passive exposure or 60 minutes of active training is enough.
Okay.
The dose. You don't, yeah. And you do have to be careful with the recovery side when you're adding heat to your training. It does take it out of you. You will notice that your fatigue is elevated and you also need to make sure your nutrition and your hydration is really spot on. You'll need a little bit more carbohydrate generally because often when you first get to the heat, your appetite's a little bit suppressed and you use more glycogen in the heat as well. So recovery is really important. So I don't know if Peter needs to do that and continue to suffer, but if he feels like it's
create
helpful,
more and more laundry, yeah. Okay, yeah, that also kind of explains a fair bit. So I have not done hot yoga in a very long time, and I feel like it's coming back into like trend, and the studio I go to has it as like also as a 6 a.m. class, which like seems just horrible, by the way. Like the first thing you do when you wake up is just go into hot yoga, just the worst. But I did it.
That's nice.
I was wrecked. Like, it wasn't a hard class. I was wrecked all weekend. This was like Friday morning. It wasn't until like Sunday afternoon that I started feeling better. And I was like, oh, I am not heat adapted at all anymore, is really what I've learned.
Right. And it's possible you started that session dehydrated.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, how many people wake up kind of dehydrated and then just go right into it? Because I don't want to chug like a giant thing of water pre-yoga class, because then I'm just going to have to keep leaving to pee. So it's sort of a no-win situation, frankly.
Yeah, that is a bit tricky. And some of the literature actually shows that like our body temperature changes based on the time of day. So there's a circadian rhythm effect on our body temperature. And some research shows that it's actually best to do your heat training at the same time of day that you're going to compete.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're competing at 6 a.m., maybe hot yoga at 6 a.m. is for you, but if not, maybe something else.
Yeah. I have a month pass, so I'm going to keep doing it for another couple weeks. But after that, I think I'm done. I'm like, I will get my money's worth. Uh, anyway, okay. I love that. I guess actually you mentioned cold plunging, and I did want to tap on that because that seems to be like a really trendy thing that's been sticking around here for the last couple of years. Cold plunging for athletes. Pros and cons. Where do you fall on the efficacy of that?
We 100% use it for athletes, but it's not every day necessarily. It's targeted. So during high volume weeks, around some of the key sessions when the next day they're having to maintain quality in their training. So we'll use it then. And we'll use it during competition, whether it's a hot competition or not. Like it's always helpful. And the main reason we're using it is just from a parasympathetic standpoint. So it reactivates the parasympathetic nervous system. And most athletes, I haven't really worked with many athletes that don't feel the benefit of doing it.
Yeah. Now again, is there a DIY cold plunge protocol that you would recommend? Since we've gone DIY heat, let's go DIY cold.
Totally. And this is like, being an Olympic athlete is not glamorous. And often they're doing DIY stuff, especially for individual athletes that don't always travel with a big support crew. And they don't have, a recovery pool pumped up waiting for them. But just bags of ice in the tub or a rubber spin and bags of ice and water. And again, though, just getting a thermometer, if you're doing hot or cold, anything, it's really handy to have a thermometer to know, what is the temperature, and that dictates how long you stay in.
Oh, okay.
So depending on the temperature of the water, say it's, say you get to a warm place and the tap water is warm. This often happens. And the amount of ice you need to use to get the temperature down is a lot more. Okay. So that's something to consider. And say maybe the best you can get is like 17, 18 degrees, which sounds warm for a cold plunge, but that's actually still considerably, cooler compared to your body temperature. And you just have to stay in it for longer and you will get the same effect.
Ugh. That sounds so unpleasant, like just staying in kind of chilly water. You don't even feel like a badass. You just feel kind of cold.
But it can still help. So, that's something that, athletes have to do. You kind of just need to know how to adjust things based on what you're dealt with.
Yeah. I love that. And I do really appreciate the point that you just made about most Olympians actually don't have access to a lot of this. And this is something I've been hearing more and more and I think actually it was talked about a lot more at this Paris Olympics, where it was like athletes actually saying like, I work 2 other jobs to be here. Like they have full-time careers outside of this because, javelin tends to not rake in the big bucks in the off season. There's a lot of track athletes who are, on the cusp of making the Olympic teams, but aren't making it. And they're also like not making really living wage. So they're doing a lot of this stuff on their own. Maybe they have a coach, maybe they have someone that they can like get these protocols from, but they're certainly not getting access to all of these facilities. So pros, they're just like us.
That's right.
Except way faster. Another thing that you had actually mentioned when we were emailing is this interest in immunity. So I did want to talk about the fact that cold and flu season is coming. And I mean, obviously, avoiding COVID was like the name of the game at Tokyo and certainly at Paris. How should we as athletes be thinking about our immune system in especially this time of year where and all, like so many of us have kids. Well, I don't, but so many of the people we work with have kids and they're coming home from school and it's a whole thing.
Yeah. No, it's a big one. And I think as a cross country athlete, I that sparked my interest in exercise immunology because it's hard to stay healthy during the winter. And then if you get sick and you have a race and you're a cross country skier, it is really hard to perform. And you're never going to perform what you could if you were not sick.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, I'm not a good cross country skier, but I will say every time I've gone out cross country skiing, I inevitably fall over at least once because I try to go like snot rocket and like blow my nose and then like smack myself with the pole and then I'm just like off the trail and it's a whole thing. So.
Yeah, so you understand. So yeah, I've always kind of been like, how can I stay healthy? I don't want to get sick. And then having kids, again, it's like, oh my gosh, like how can I not get what they are bringing home?
Yeah.
And then yeah, just through COVID, and I've worked with a few athletes that have had long COVID, and so that's brought my attention to the immunology space as well, helping them get over that. So I guess some good things to share with you today would be a colleague of mine did a study with an Olympic team sport. It was a hockey team, and they found that a common denominator to them getting sick was that someone else in the house was sick, which is not surprising.
Makes sense, okay? Yeah.
But it is actually possible to avoid getting sick if someone in your house is sick. And so what do? You don't sleep in the same bed as them. Okay? So like if my husband is sick, he will not sleep next to me.
Nice.
If my children are sick, they will not sleep next to me, which sounds really harsh, but my husband will sleep next to them because his immune system is better than mine and he can sleep next to the kids and not get sick. So just things like that. Just things like that. Not sharing hand towels. Okay? If someone in the house is sick, don't touch any of the hand towels. Don't share toothpaste, in the bathroom. Things like that. Just avoid anything where your hands are going to touch something and like you're going to touch your eyes. You're going to touch your nose. The eyes are a way that you can get sick by touching something. So, those are all things. Another thing I add is as soon as someone in my house is sick, I will start upping all my immune supplements and just take like them as if I was sick. And usually that makes a difference. And I also will do, cyclical hyperventilation, like a breathing protocol, which, modulates your innate immune system and actually really works to help you not get sick. And I also use this if I feel like I'm on the fence and about to get sick, but I'm not actually fully sick.
Okay. And where can one find this breathing protocol?
So it's, in the public domain, it would be referred to as Wim Hof breathing. Okay. So it's 30 to 40 breaths of, fully breathing in and letting the air out. And it's kind of like 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. And then you have a breath hold at the end of it. And then you do 3 to 4 rounds of that. And like on YouTube, there's heaps of ones that I follow that I just put on a track and I just follow along. And it's really effective. And I'll do that for probably 2 to 3 days. And if I feel like I'm getting sick, and it often, unless it's something gnarly like a proper flu, it might not work, but it does help. And if I am kind of teetering on sick and kind of am getting sick, I feel better way faster as well. And I've tried this with athletes, and it works. People, it's not just me that finds it works well. And there's actually some brilliant studies that have been done on it where they injected, and this was with Wim Hof. This is what piqued my interest with him is he had he's actually his ideas are published in some incredible journals. And, they had this group of people where they injected them with E. coli and they were doing this breathing, and their response, the people that were doing the breathing, their symptoms were much less severe, considerably less severe than the control group.
Wild.
So it is actually having a physiological effect on your immune system. So it's quite cool. I think it's called Breathing Central, the one that I use, and it's good because it has lots of different levels. So people that are experienced, might do a longer breath hold, whereas someone just starting might only do a 30-second breath hold at the end of it.
Okay. And I really love this because this is, it's free, and you can argue that there are a lot of other benefits, right? Like we're, just getting in touch with our breath, like figuring out how our breathing works. I know even, as I've been in these hot yoga classes, as they're doing breathing in there, I'm like, oh yeah, I forget to think about breathing ever. And it's definitely gotten me back to really tuning into it. So there's really no downside of trying this.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And now what about, so many athletes sacrifice sleep for their training. Can you speak to sleep and immunity and maybe we not?
Sleep is so big. I'm always hammering on about sleep. You need to make sure you have a good sleep environment, which is not too hot, right? 18 to 19 degrees Celsius. You need to make sure, one thing that I like is, there's research that showed if you can see your hand in your room when you go to sleep, that the room probably isn't dark enough for optimal sleep.
Ooh.
So, I have kids, so we have night lights in the hall and things like that. And I just always have a sleep mask on when I sleep, and it does make a difference.
Yeah.
White noise can help. So those are all environmental things. And then having a good routine, obviously, so many people are on their phones these days, but it's a no-brainer. If I still do it sometimes too, but if I do, I pay for it.
Yep.
Either I have a hard time getting to sleep, or I will wake up and it's just, I don't have the same quality of sleep for sure. So not doing that. I often will lie on a acupressure mat.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading before I go to bed, that really helps. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll lie on that, and that will put me back to sleep if I can't get back to sleep. Sleep is so vitally important for, performance, for brain function, for not getting sick. If you have a few nights and you're not getting in sleep, you're more likely to get sick or injured.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, sleep is so important. And the last one I always encourage my athletes is to have some kind of a strategy in place for if they're in the danger zone. So with their sleep, so say they have had a couple nights of terrible sleep and you don't want to have a third night of terrible sleep. So what kind of sleep aids do you have that you can pull out in these times of need? Or maybe they can never sleep the night before they're traveling, or they can never sleep before a competition, or whatever stress is going on, and they need to bank those hours for their recovery, and their health. So the athletes I work with will have different strategies to pull out at different times as needed.
I like that a lot. It's funny you mentioned the sleep mask. I woke up this morning and realized both Peter and our dachshund, Peter had on his sleep mask and our dachshund had his head under the comforter, but just his head. So I was like, oh my God, they're both just sleeping right next to me with their sleep masks on. Their sleep hygiene is so on point. Granted, one's a dachshund, but he's doing great.
Nice.
Okay, and you did mention long COVID, and I know we've gotten questions about that. Talk to me about the return to sport process with that and what you found with the athletes you've worked with.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenging one.
Yeah.
But we got through it, and the athletes got through it. And what I had to do usually with athletes was they'd have to take a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks off training completely and kind of reset the body, because often what was happening is they'd be trying to do stuff still, even though it was lighter, but they were just not, they're still symptomatic. So if they were symptomatic, whether it was fatigue or other issues like brain fog and anxiety even was a symptom, then it was, okay, we need to reset your body, 2 to 3 weeks off. And then my rule of thumb was looking at, say, their lightest volume week was around 7 to 8 hours in duration. We aimed for 50% of that for their first week back.
Cool.
And then, which sounds like nothing, right? But that was what they could do. We were trying to exercise, train them without invoking more symptoms.
Yep.
So we were gauging our programming on their symptoms. So we started really conservatively, and we initially would do that almost like we would only change one thing a week. So say the first week they did 4 30 to 60 minute sessions, and if that was okay, then we would maybe extend the duration of, keep the same number of sessions, but we would extend a couple of the durations of sessions. We'd only change like one variable a week to ensure that we understood if they could respond well to that. And if they didn't, we knew that what we had changed and that we had to maybe go back a little bit. So it was very kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Mm-hmm.
But that really did make a big difference for the athletes. I did have athletes using hyperbaric oxygen chambers. That definitely helped. Hydrogen therapy, that worked. That helped as well. So there were different other modalities we used, B12 shots.
I think that slow comeback thing is so interesting because so many masters athletes refuse to do a slow comeback. So I think it's like so good to hear that, no, this is how pro athletes are handling this. Like they are taking it in these really specific, like slow stages. So if they're doing that and they're literally getting paid to do this, those of us that are paying to do this should probably follow their lead.
But the thing is we didn't want them to go backwards.
Yeah.
Like we needed to progress them, and sometimes the best way to progress is just being really conservative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hard to do for sure, especially when you're like feeling almost okay, but yeah, super, super important.
Yeah.
Okay. And before we wrap up here, I do want to talk about the Her Strength Coach course, which is out mid-October, so right around as this episode is dropping. So tell us all about it, where people can find out more, the who, what, when, where, why, how. Let's hear it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So Her Strength is an online platform for people involved in youth female sport, so adolescent female athletes. And our first offer is a coach course, and it's all about the science of how the physical changes and the psychological changes during puberty impact a young female athlete's ability to train and perform. And yeah, it's just to upskill, like the level of knowledge is low for athletes, for coaches, and often for parents. And in terms of female puberty and sport, it's not just the menstrual cycle. It's, their hips get wider, they grow boobs, their body composition changes. Often young girls will plateau for a couple of years during adolescence. And all of these things are not the only reasons. There's other things going on, of course, but 2 in 3 girls will drop out of sport during or by the end of adolescence. And so it's like the greatest mass exodus of females in sport is during puberty.
Yeah.
And so
and I mean, honestly, if coaches had a better understanding of this, you can so clearly see how girls might actually be inclined to stay in sport if coaches have this, understanding and can pass that on to the girls. Cause it would be incredibly frustrating to, plateau or even feel like you're going backwards, especially if you were a fantastic, preteen or pre-adolescent athlete. And then suddenly all these body changes, throwing everything off from how you feel about yourself to your actual literal balance, wild time. And you and I've talked about this in other conversations. So many coaches are just teachers who are doing the coach job and don't have that background. And I mean, we need those coaches. Those are super important. Not to diminish that at all, but they don't have the resources. So I'm so glad that something like this exists.
Yeah, so it is really exciting. Like there's a lot of interest right now in the female athlete space, but what I found is it's more targeted to adult female athletes, and now there's a trend of talking more about perimenopause and menopause, which are all super important things. But we've got these girls that are leaving sport and they don't have the support that they need. And I've always thought, from the work that I've done and seeing young athletes come into the high performance system, like they just have no idea. And so, in terms of, say, the menstrual cycle, for one thing, is if we can educate them and bring that conversation into the sport environment at a younger age, it will make it so much easier for them as they continue through sport. Like a crazy stat is that even adult Olympians don't know about their menstrual cycle. So there was a study done in Australia, and 91% of the female Olympic athletes had a low level of knowledge about their menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And these are people that are full time. Their job is that their body is performing, and they don't have that awareness. So we need to shift things dramatically to help these athletes.
100%. Yeah. Could not agree more. So where can people find out more about the coach course?
Yeah. So, we have a website, herstrength.co, and encourage people to check that out and, join our email list for updates. The coach course is, as you said, coming out mid-October, and it's very holistic, and it's very detailed in giving information, but then also giving tools so that the coaches can actually confidently implement some things and have the conversations and know what
is the key part there. Yep.
That's like, it's great to have information, but if coaches aren't actually doing something with it, it's kind of like, what was the point in doing this? And so, I really want to see like action being taken, coaches taking action rather than just kind of think, oh, that would be a good idea in theory, but I don't think I can do it.
Yep.
So anyways, find out more about that on the website. We also are on Instagram and Facebook as well. And if people want to contact me directly, they can contact me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll include all of those links in the show notes. Julia, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I knew we went all over the place and we could have talked for an hour about any of the topics, but I love everything we got to. So good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.